And the training as well. I think when I first started my PhD, because I haven't come from a research background, I remember writing the discussion with too much implications.
Too much. All implication, no data.
I was like, this is not part of the data. You didn't find that. You just said. Hello. Hi there. We're Dr. X
Dr. Y.
I'm Dr. Z, and welcome to PH Done, the podcast where we talk about everything PhD and beyond.
All right. So today we're talking about the big P, publication.
Hey.
I can already see some of us stuttering. All right. Well, how about we start with why we publish and kind of what's the deal with publications. I mean, I'll start by saying in very romantic terms and innocent terms, publications are supposed to be the way that you share your scientific discoveries with the research world, right? So it's like you depositing your golden nugget of knowledge to add to the collective database of what we know. But, however, we know that's not what it ends up being. So what do you guys think? What's the deal with publications?
I think because I didn't come from a research background, and to get my head around that it is legal and that the things that you've done, if you haven't published, it doesn't really get acknowledged as like evidence. Like you can't use it. You can't use in bracket Dr. Z, Dr. X. Then it's not like something that people can agree on or thinking that it worth anything. So for me to get my head around that, it took a long time. And then to understand the system, the different impact factor, and to understand, the paying system. I had a supervisor that said that, I just can't afford any journal article. So you need to find free, like high impact free journal article. So then it's the whole thing that you have to understand how the system works, which we'll cover today. But I guess that for at the beginning, it probably took me quite a long time just to get my head around why to publish first of all, and why it is so important. But on your personal merit, it's also that it's your track record that determines how far you go.
So journals are basically like academic currency. They're what you use to get grants and get anything else. So it's like you're building on it. So it's like using a dollar to make another dollar. It's like using publications to get more publications, pretty much. But I think like the journal system, for those of you who don't know, is pretty like fucked up. It's like it's a bit of a pyramid scheme, because like people outside of academia know this, but like when we publish a paper, we don't get paid, and when we review a paper, we don't get paid. And the only people who get any money are the journals, who get money from people subscribing to read the papers that none of us were paid to write, essentially. And so what's like really important is usually your number of citations. Like it used to be impact factor of the journal, but now it's sort of like how many citations you can get on a paper. And that you can get that up by having an open access journal, essentially. So that's like when people don't have to pay to view your work, but instead you pay to publish your work. And it's usually quite expensive, like around 3,000 USD. So essentially you don't get paid when you write the paper. You don't get paid to review the paper, but you have to pay for them to accept and publish your paper if you want other people to read it for free, essentially.
This reminds me of this meme I saw about like what peer review is, and it's like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was kind of like peer reviewing papers is like getting a random email from someone and being like, hello, I would like you to mow my lawn on the weekend for free. If you are unable to mow my lawn on the weekend for free, can you suggest 3 other people who may be able to mow my lawn on the weekend for free?
It's so true, though.
Yeah, it's such a strange. It's like just doing a service for free, right?
Yeah, the reason we do it is because our currency is it's our money.
Yeah. I don't know if it's kind of an outdated saying now, but you might have heard of publish or perish. Regardless, I think to some extent it does still hold true. Like,
Yeah.
you've heard us say that everything in academia is metrics based, and basically publications is one of the biggest metrics, if
Yeah.
not the metric, right? That judges your worth
Yeah.
as a researcher. But having said that, like what Z was saying, I do think in terms of like funding and promotion and stuff, it's moving away a bit from just publication or just the number of publications to
Yeah.
the quality and the impact of your publication.
So, what do you guys think of the social media as a way of tracking the impact? 'Cause now you see on the journals, you have all these matrix where it includes how many people have tweeted and how many was messed. Yeah.
It's messed up, but so I think what they've done when it used to just be about the impact of the journal and how many publications you've had, they've now moved away to the impact of it based on like the field weighted citation index is a big one, right? So they're trying to make it an even playing field, and they'll weight the age of your paper and what field it's published in.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. If you're an early career researcher and your publication is less than like 2 years old, it's really hard to even have like 1 or 2 citations, right?
Yeah.
And so social media becomes the only alternative metric for you to say that it's had any sort of outcome or impact. I feel like it's worked well for some things. Like if you're in a field that has a lot of engaged advocates on social media, then it can get picked up
Yes.
a lot.
Yeah.
But if not, then it might not work well for you.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, then it involves building a presence as a researcher on Twitter, right? Because if that's part of the matrix and you want to be friends with the peak advocates and something important comes out, you want them to retweet, you want that sort of, so that means another.
Yeah. Exactly. It's another thing that you need to be on top of just to get that recognition.
Yeah. I remember one of my colleagues said that academia love is to retweet. If you love this person, you need to retweet everything the person publishes.
I guess it only works if you have followers on Twitter. But if you're not very charismatic and you can't get, it's like becomes a popularity contest.
It
almost.
does.
It does.
It actually does.
It does.
And it's very political in
Yes.
that sense, I guess.
Yeah.
One of my supervisors before, he's very, very, very sort of like an influencer on Twitter. So he's whatever he update tweets every day on like just daily issues. So he has a huge following. So whenever he, publish anything, there's huge tweets going on. So I think the matrix is getting sort of more diverse, good or bad way. But I remember just keep checking the score saying that you are on the top 25% of all published article like in your field for this number of years, and then it changes. Yeah, I think most of the journal article have that sort of matrix now that you can see. Okay, if you published, how you're looking against all the other articles they've ever published.
But it's never going to be an even playing field,
No,
right?
No.
It's never.
no.
Those numbers are never really going to speak to the value
No.
of the work, and it depends on what field you're in, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like whether it gets picked up, and if it's like a systematic review, which many more people will just naturally cite. I mean, and they try to weight it by saying, oh, if it's a review, that's not as important as original research, etc. So they do try to put all these things in place to make it even, but I think you can't avoid the inherent
Yeah. And I guess also, like, for example, if you sit within a department that does well social media, because with my publication, all the tweets come from my department's tweets of my publication.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's not really a even field.
So, I mean, what do you guys think is like a reasonably good publication record? I think that was a question that was always on my mind, like in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like trying to, am I good enough? Like, is this enough? Because some people would graduate with freaking 50 publications.
Yeah. To be honest, I do feel like at the beginning when they said that you can do it by publication, that was what everyone's striving towards. So it means straight publication.
Thesis by publication.
Yeah. So I think sort of people want to get to that straight publication for their PhD. I think that's a reasonable. Yeah,
Mm.
I didn't have that.
Depends on the field, right?
Definitely.
I mean, for us, health is a bit trickier than basic science, I would say, to publish. So it's probably the metrics are probably a bit different. But I feel like it's so sad now because it's like you can't just publish on what you're interested in or you think is really important. You publish based on like how easy is this to get through the review process, and it's like how likely is this going to get cited.
Yeah.
So you might pick like the creation of a new measure over another issue that you might think is really important, just because the creation of a new measure that's going to get cited heaps. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of the direction that this is heading, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, it's unproductive.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember where I got this from, but I'd always heard like 3 to 5 publications a year is the strong record.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen also this question asked on online forums, and people are like, "Oh, if you're an early postdoc supervising, and you're not really supervising a lot of students or whatever, you're lucky to get 1 or 2 a year," which I feel is realistic if you think about how long the process takes.
Yeah.
And we've just ranted about the whole process of rejection and stuff. So that's realistic. But you also see a lot of people who are publishing way beyond that. And I feel like it's because of that pressure that exists. And like you having like twice as many publications as another person doesn't mean you were twice as productive or, you know, twice as valuable. But that unfortunately does have an impact.
Yeah. I was just saying, one of the PhD students at my current department recently just finished, got his PhD, and he was in his presentation to the department saying that he got 37 publications over the.
Off.
Yeah, and then he got like a level B job straight away. So I think that sort of plays a part as well when people looking at, like he said that every time he goes to interviews, people are very, very impressed with him. So he felt like that's, as Dr. said, it's a very good currency to have. Negotiating salaries or getting to where you want. Yeah.
I don't know how it works in other countries, but here, like, so we've been to, you know, a few seminars on how to get fellowships, and it's publications, but it's unrealistic what they expect because they look at the years since you finish your PhD, and a lot of people who had that many publications did work before they started PhD, or they were clinicians, and that's how they publish, and they don't take that into consideration. If you just jump straight into a PhD, you can't really be on the same field.
Exactly. I think yesterday I was looking at the results of like the people who got fellowships. So in Australia, the NHMRC fellowships, the lowest tier, which is supposed to be like 0 to 10 years post PhD or something, or is it 7? I don't know. But literally, I looked at everyone, at least from our institution. There's like everyone I looked at was a clinician.
Oh.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Like
that's usually how it goes.
and because they've been a clinician. But that's funny, right? Because when you're putting in the application, you're supposed to say your research active periods. So it's not just post PhD. It's like even if before the PhD if you had opportunity. But I feel like maybe people aren't being honest and saying, "Oh, I was a clinician, so I didn't really." But you know, I happened to be on 10 publications before I started the PhD. Like, it just inherently disadvantages people who go straight into a PhD.
I hope they change that in the future. Otherwise, I guess new PhDs have to start thinking more strategically and maybe start working a few years before they do their PhD.
I mean, I understand from the point of view of the funder, right? Because it's taxpayers' money and they give it to someone who they know is going to do a good job. But you know, if you have these really hardworking and really able postdocs who don't have a clinical background who can still do it, but are getting disadvantaged, then that's obviously not fair.
And I guess as a postdoc, sort of the next trajectory, the ideal trajectory is to get your own fellowship, right? That's where you really get to grow your own research identity and who you are and establish your own field. So how do you guys manage that pressure to publish as a postdoc?
I don't.
I drink. I think, like, because of the system, essentially, like what Z was saying before, essentially publications become a means to an end. And that end being surviving and staying competitive in academia.
Yeah.
You have to always look for opportunities to get on board papers because the one project that you're on as a postdoc is not going to give you that record.
No.
And so you always need to have like a number of papers at different stages in circulation and preparation for submission. So for me, personally, I aim to keep at least one paper being submitted every 3 months. Obviously,
Wow.
I'm not the first author on it,
Yeah.
but whether it's through students or collaborating with others, and that means like statistically, if they all take the same amount of time, it should give you 3 to 4 papers a year.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I don't think I do that. I don't do any. I mean, yes, there's always a constant pressure to publish, and I'm always thinking of ideas. But sometimes other work just takes over,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just have a bulk. So I've got maybe like 5 papers all submitted at the same time.
Yeah.
Publication. I just wait for them to come around.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'll have spurts of productive time. I think the thing that really helped me was during the PhD, my supervisor got me on board with supervising like honors students.
Yeah.
So by like naturally, you end up being like hopefully they publish. They get at least one publication, a thesis. So you have those to fall back on to like plump out your record as well.
For some of my current projects, it's so much doing things. Like even the professors are not thinking of publishing things. Because it's funded by a government agency and supposed to be embedded in part of the service provision. So, like, it wasn't a priority. And it's really hard to push. And then to build ethics application in service provision, that you need approval from governments, university, and all that. It just, like, extra layer of a lot of work. It really depends on the project. Because my project is not designed to have massive publication. There's no one, no one was
produce data.
Having the resources. It's just like the professor's actual thing, and I'm sitting on it. And so they are not pushing for it, and clearly the service provision part is not pushing for it. So it will end up being me push for research to be written up. So if I'm not keen enough, nothing will get published out of that project.
I think for me, secondary data analysis is the only way to go now. It's the quickest way to publish, really.
It's just not feasible to collect any data, right? At least on your own.
Especially when you've got a million other things that you're supposed to be doing as part of your job.
Yeah, there's definitely been times where I've been like doubtful of the quality of a publication that I'm about to submit, and I can admit that I've chosen to publish something before I felt confident about like
the rigorous,
how important and good quality it is. And I know different people have different mindsets. Like my current supervisor is very much just chuck it in, you'll be right. Whereas my previous supervisor is much more anal. There's a lot of like, so what does this mean? What does it actually add? And it's a painful process, but at the end of it, I must admit that I think I'm more satisfied and happy when it goes through that. Although I'm not happy when I'm trying to write fellowships or whatever. Like, damn it, I should have just been more strategic.
So going back to your point about being rigorous, like I guess that's the reviewer's job, right? You're supposed to check the rigor of it and make sure that it's all up to scratch. But I guess that's the other thing that people don't know. Like the reviewers are just people. They're people literally like us. We know as much about the field as we do it pretty much. Like we're not actual experts in whatever it is. We just have some knowledge of this field. So that's why you see sometimes papers that go through and there's mistakes in there pretty much, and that's why that happens. So because as we said, we don't get paid for this kind of thing, so we just do it as part of our service. And of course, you can reject papers you don't think you're an expert in, or you have enough expertise to review. But sometimes people just let things go through that might not be meet that kind of methodological rigor. Yeah, do you have a story about that? Why?
Yes. So on the topic of like publication risk, You may have heard a story of a particular researcher from an Australian university a few years back, right? Who essentially fudged dozens, like 30 papers or something.
Wow.
He was like plagiarizing, falsifying results, and duplicating results, all that kind of stuff. And all these other researchers were dubbing him in, and eventually he had to retract all his papers and he got stood down from his job. And I mean, but it just illustrates that's what it does to you. Right? Obviously, he did a bad thing. It's bad research integrity and
Yeah.
serious misconduct. But at the same time, I think it's a really sad testament to the research world
Mm.
and its constant hunger for more outputs. And what you have to realize is that when these are health and medical researchers, they could be doing serious damage
Yeah.
and wasting a
True.
lot of
Yeah.
taxpayer money. So when I went back to look up this guy's story, okay, might be a bit of a rabbit hole, but I found another story of someone else, right? Similar type of story, right? He's like a medical researcher, a professor, super productive, making breakthrough advances. Some other researcher found errors in their work and contacted them in like 2009 or something. And the guy was just like, oh, okay, thanks for picking that up. Sorry, see ya. But the person that found errors just kind of persisted. And eventually there were whistleblowers within this guy's lab. And together they it sparked an investigation. W, right? And apparently they got a total of 5 independent expert panels that were commissioned by the university to investigate the person. But they cleared him of any misconduct. So, but apparently the process was really sticky. Like investigators, they were like really restricted in what information or data they could actually access to validate claims. And so one of the investigators actually complained to the National Research Funding Watchdog and was like, oh, the university is restricting like the investigation. So they're trying to not get a negative outcome for their own kind of professor.
Yeah.
And so like it was only 2016 the person was cleared, like publicly. The university announced, oh yeah, there's no misconduct, etc. But even after this, the guy's publications continue to get retracted. And the complaining didn't stop. There were more complaints to like, the Australian Research Integrity Committee. So eventually, the university gives in and commissions a final investigation. And their conclusion was basically like, oh, yeah, he may have acted in a way that was negligent, but it was only between these specific dates.
Okay.
And it wasn't gross and persistent negligence. You know, the consequences weren't that bad. So I'm not sure what the situation is now. But I did Google their name and found they're still an active researcher. Like they have a proper research profile on the university website. And they're still publishing things, supervising
I
students.
guess they could fire him.
I don't want to. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to condemn someone's future because of past wrongs or whatever. But it's just a bit fascinating that they still remain in the same job at the same.
Maybe universities are a bit of an enigma because I feel like in corporate world that person would just get fired. straight
Yeah.
away.
Like as soon as they've done anything to, I don't know. Maybe he's still bringing in a lot of funding.
Yeah.
Like why else would
Maybe.
you keep someone? Maybe he's.
Is that what it is?
Oh yeah, and they don't have the grounds to get rid of him. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that wasn't just about the urge to publish. It could be about prestige or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think there is really something about the need to generate more outputs that breed something unhealthy.
And I wonder how many these incidents gets reported. I would assume that sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, well, I saw somewhere like the number of retractions from journals, like in recent years, is like 1,500 a year.
Wow.
And it's up from like a couple hundred, like 10 or so years ago. So clearly it's an increasing problem.
That's like one of my worst nightmares. To get retraction.
Ratum.
There was a very famous Chinese professor, and she works for a very like high prestige Chinese university, and I think there was 500 papers that the images were photoshopped. Like you said that you bought something. I think she had a whole team working on the photoshopping part.
Oh my
Mm.
god.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy now that I heard from my friends in China. Like the pressure is on since the master degree level that you have to publish something.
Mm.
It is known that you have
Oh,
to get
wow.
sort of just keep publishing. That's I think it's not just 3 to 5 a year. I think it's a lot more than that. It's just a very harsh environment in China nowadays to publish. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that'd be interesting to know. Let us know in your country what's the norm.
So whether you should publish during your PhD, I think
Mm.
you should because
Yeah.
you want to get started early, and the earlier you publish, the more citations you'll get by the time you want to apply for fellowships.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I don't know about other countries, but here, when you submit a thesis by publication, it gets through a lot easier usually because technically your papers have already been peer reviewed, so they don't need to like review it again at that kind of thoroughly. So they tend to get it a lot easier than the traditional theses.
That's only here. I had a really bad experience because mine went to the UK. And
Yeah.
I, for some reason, or maybe it was just the reviewers that didn't really weren't familiar with it, but they were like, "Where's your massive methodology section? Where's your all that kind of stuff?" And how do you know that this is your work? I'm like, "Well, I'm first author on these publications, so it should speak for itself." But no, so essentially, I end up having to write almost a full thesis in response to their comments.
I wonder if other countries just don't have thesis by publication.
Yeah,
It's just an Australian thing.
maybe.
It's no below.
Do you think any researcher will pay out of pocket just to publish?
Oh, I doubt it. It's thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
If it was a couple hundred, maybe.
Yeah, it was like the same as like a
Yeah.
conference
Mm,
kind of thing. Then maybe, but yeah, maybe not. But it's also weird because who gets that kind of funding? I
yeah,
feel like the only career researchers can't even publish in open access because where do you get that money from?
exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you can't even apply for a
That's
grant
right.
to publish in open access. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. In my department, it's a
So
very rigorous assessment process of which article get to publish in open access journal. So it's a whole application form. You have to
really?
demonstrate, why this, why your article will benefit the greater audience and da 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 da. So the department can use some of their administrative money to pay for it. It is a lot of money. Yeah.
It is. It is. I think the model for it is supposed to be, you know how when you get grants and they take something ridiculous like 30% of the grant,
Yeah.
like the university takes it.
Yes.
And they're supposed to feed it back to like your department or school or institution, and they're supposed to have like handle it and buy you like software and that kind of stuff. But I think it's a very muddy system. It doesn't really work that way. Do you guys think it's a political affair to be publishing? Because you're
Yeah.
working with other people.
Yeah.
And it's their record as well as
I think it's definitely how you build connections. You ask people to be co-authors. It's definitely a political thing because honestly they don't end up contributing that much. But then you build that kind of connection. So if you need them for grants in the future, they're more likely.
Yeah.
You already have that kind of
Yeah. Authorship's a funny one, eh? Have you guys ever had any issues over fighting for authorship?
I kind of just take it sitting down. Right now, at my career stage, I'm like, wherever you want to put me, just put me there. It's fine.
So I don't
I never had any issues, but it seems to be a conversation that people have that it gives a bit of tension at the beginning. Like, today we're going to talk about this, and then we were thinking, we were proposing, and this is how it's going to lead. So I do feel like people dance around it a bit when they talk about authorship and who's going to take lead and do what. And I actually do like that. Like, people are quite open with it. And so if you are expected to be the first author, then these are the parts that you need to do, and we'll just do this part. I like a clear communication than just, no one saying anything.
no, definitely. I think that's the right way because I've worked with teams where they've been really unclear about who is the author. I mean, I guess for people who aren't familiar, there's usually like the first author or the lead author who's the person who's doing the bulk of the work and the writing. And then you have last author or senior author who's supposed to be like the, I don't know, what would you call like the intellectual lead of the overall. It's usually the big person, the supervisor. And And then you have kind of, some people say you can fight for corresponding author, which is basically just means you
Yeah.
liaise with the journal, but you can sell it as having had a key role on that paper as well. But yeah, I think it's definitely better to have those conversations at the outset, because there have been instances where I've been on papers where someone's done all the work and then the supervisor comes in at the end and he's like, okay, these are the authors and this is the order it goes in. And then you're just like, well, what?
Yeah.
No.
Have you had that experience, Dr. Vi?
Yes. So I've had to pick up authorship, like a paper that someone else had started and just was sitting on it for years because they just couldn't, they didn't have the time, basically. And then I went in, but it essentially needed to be redone. But because of I've come in late, then I was like second last, least prominent author on it. And I was like, hang on a sec, I really shouldn't have to do all this. I'm basically acting like the first author. But obviously you have to give some sort of recognition to the people who did the base work and got the funding in and everything like that. So I kind of had to negotiate my way through it.
I don't understand the
Yeah.
ordering anymore, because I know first and last. Like first is obviously first author, and then last is your supervisor, and then second author is the person who did the second amount of work. But second last author apparently is also quite prestigious.
Yeah, I've heard that. But I don't
I think
know.
seen people argue it on their fellowships. They say, in my
Right.
field, I'm second last author here, but this represents this. So I think that's
Okay.
how you can get away with it. But
Yeah.
just on the topic of, authorship, I've heard some horror stories of people. Luckily, I haven't experienced any of this, where it's like PhD students, they write up the paper and they supervisor doesn't let them be first author. The supervisor is first author, or they'll bring in like other people, or they won't let them be corresponding author. It's just, it's crazy. Like, and luckily we
That's
haven't
really
experienced
bad.
anything like that. Yeah,
Why do I don't understand? I thought senior author was a big,
I
it's
think
like good
maybe
enough for them.
if you have two senior authors, and then like the other one argues to be first author or something. It's it's crazy.
You can find like tables where they put out all the different parts of publication and you kind of score it to determine authorship. I feel like that's a good way, at least at the outset. Like, don't actually do it, but if I will always like send it to all the proposed authors and be like, okay, so it looks like this is how it should go. And it does put a lot of focus on the person doing the writing, as opposed to people doing like data collection.
I think RAs don't usually get to go on papers if they've just done data collection, which I find is a little unfair. Like, I try to put RAs on.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it also helps their field, like track record. Yeah.
It's not like it disadvantages you. My supervisor is a bit too, he'll just be like,
Clever.
oh, let's get this RA to submit this paper and we'll just put them in as an author.
Okay, that's a bit too lenient. My supervisor's the opposite. She's very funny about authorship. Sometimes I'll be like, this person is an expert in this, can I bring them on? And she'll be like, no. Oh, it's like, we need to negotiate how much they're actually going to contribute and whether they deserve authorship. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what do you guys feel about being an author versus being a reviewer? What are your experiences with that? Because I have a couple of stories about things I didn't realize until I became a reviewer.
Well, I think you should start us off then.
I remember the first time I reviewed a paper, and it turned out to be, oh my god, I didn't realize this turned out to be a very interesting story. So the first time I reviewed a paper, I was like I felt like a bit of imposter syndrome. Like, am I good enough to be reviewing this? I'm not an expert in this whatsoever. And it's like, but then I reviewed it and it was a terrible paper.
Does that make you feel better?
No, actually one of the issues I wanted to address, one of the problems with publishing I find is that most papers come from high income countries.
Yes.
Not a lot of papers come from lower middle income countries, but even though this is a movement in the field towards, like, trying to be more inclusive of lower middle income countries, the research quality sometimes is just not there. So that first paper I reviewed was from a lower middle income country, and they basically said that they were arguing for the cost effectiveness of an intervention, and the maths was all wrong. And I redid all the maths for them because it was the first review I did, so I did redid all the calculations for them in my comments and everything. And they just like when they came back, they pretty much just like copy and pasted what I did. But at the time, I was so nice and I just let it go through. But actually, I recently came across a paper that was also from a lower middle income country that was also really just not great, and that one I immediately rejected because I was like, this is not up to standard. So that one was a review, and they didn't put any implications of anything. So I remember during my PhD, my supervisor would always be like, you need to put the implication of this. What is the implication of this? At the time, because I was a junior researcher, I didn't understand what that meant at all. But now I've been in the field for longer and I understand, more of the political implications of certain things like interventions. I know what you're supposed to say. But this paper was pretty much like they were reviewing, physical activity interventions. And then one of the papers they reviewed, they were like, oh, yeah, I find that people with disability can't exercise much. And that was it. That was their conclusion. And I was like, what is the implications of this? Like, excuse me? You're not telling me anything. Like, we know this. Like, are you not going to tell me, like, what are the political implications of this? Does you mean we should, be assisting, making sure that this doesn't happen? And I just couldn't, because there was a lot of the comments where they were just kind of just stopped at the fact of what they found, and they didn't go beyond that. And I just immediately rejected it. It's like, this is not up to par.
That's pretty unfortunate if you think about it. They just don't have the same resources and opportunities.
Yeah.
And then there's an added layer of English.
Yeah. And the training as well. I think when I first started my PhD, because I haven't come from a research background, I remember writing the discussion with too much implications.
Too much.
All implications, no data.
I was like, this is not part of the data. You didn't find that. You just
I guess you like solution focus, like real world solution focus before you write the paper.
Yes, I think it took time for me to get used to it, to know, okay, this is the middle ground where you sit. You don't overinterpret, but you still have to say what it means in the broader context.
I guess having been on that side of being a reviewer as well, there are definitely some things that you can do as an author to give yourself a better chance. I think the halo effect is real, like formatting, spell checking, proofreading, because again, it's all free work. And sometimes you'll get people who are nice enough just to look past that. But a lot of people won't be like that. Like, it'll be annoying to them if they have to read through something that's really looks unfinished. Also, something that's worked for me is emailing the editors beforehand, before submitting a paper, kind of preparing them for what's about to come. Because sometimes you have papers that are a bit it could be maybe, for example, like a qualitative study that's way over the word limit. Or it could be a commentary that has some data that doesn't quite fit into the types of papers that they usually accept. But I found if you email them and tell them about what the paper's about and that kind of thing, then it just passes through. Whereas if you just submit it, they'll immediately just be like, no, this is the right fit. So remember, editors are people too. So
just figured they wouldn't have enough time.
I think okay. I guess maybe it makes things easier for
That's
them
a stupid
a little
question.
bit as well.
Does the editors get paid?
I think some do. Depends what journal and depends what level of editor you are. Because editorial boards on some journals are really big. So I think most people don't get paid. And even with the chief editors, I think they only get paid a little bit. It's like conference
Because I
organization.
see other colleagues being assistant editor, and I wonder if that's similar to a reviewer where you take minimum duty from that journal just to have that merit, or you actually get paid for it.
I don't think so. So one of the journals that I'm a reviewer, they have a reviewer board, so it makes it sound more prestigious. But really, your name gets attached to the paper that gets published. So I think that's enough prestige, so they don't have to pay you.
So again, it's a lot of great work. And this is probably a repetition of what we've said before, but I think responding in the right way to make to reveal comments, right? So make sure the reviewer feels acknowledged. And I'll tend to write a really thorough response, even if the change itself isn't that extensive. Because A, you have the effect of looking like you've really paid attention to what they've said. But B, sometimes you just fatigue them so they don't bother. And it just gives them a certain impression and they move on and they don't read everything. So I tend to over quote and be like, oh yes, and this is a good point and blah 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 blah. And it tends to get me over the line.
Because I think I'm a bit different to you guys. English is my second language. So I didn't feel secure enough just to submit my own words. Even sometimes after like your supervisor had a brief look through, I still feel like there may be sentences that doesn't make sense. So I do pay for like proofreading services for journal articles. Yeah, it just gives me the extra psychological comfort, knowing that something proofed. Yeah.
Usually, I wouldn't reject a paper based on English alone. I might comment on it, and but I think that like you also with like little typos and stuff. I didn't realize this. Like, yes, when you put it in, it should be pretty good. But like your reviewers will pick up on typos, and then when you do your revisions, you can fix up typos, and then you have a proof, then you can fix up typos.
Yeah.
So typos are not as big of a deal as they.
A big deal. Yeah.
I think it's because my PhD supervisor is very rigorous in that way, so I'm really scared of having that English on there.
I think your supervisor was just the biggest barrier to everything, the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
And then once you're through,
Good, I guess that's that means if they're thorough enough, you usually don't get that many comments from the reviewers. Sometimes you can, but I found that like because sometimes my co-authors, they're just like, oh yeah, this is great, and then it goes to reviewers and they're like, oh my god, like pages and pages of like how this is all wrong.
Yeah.
So what do you guys have preferences for the types of papers you like to write? Like, given how time poor we all are.
Research paper easy to follow. As in, once you get the gist of it, it's easier to write like methods and results and just reporting the numbers and tables there. But like for me, for systematic review and qualitative research, it's harder because depends on the journal. I think Dr. Y mentioned this, but qualitative research, different journal may want different things to see how you influence the paper, how you as an instrument that plays in the study. So for me to come up with what is the right way to stop and how much do you talk about yourself is harder to write it up and in the right way. And also, I used to have the problem with qualitative papers. I don't know the quotes, whether to put 1 quote, 2 quotes, and how much you talk about the quotes, like as in that repeating, summarizing it. So with qualitative research, I still think that I don't know what's the best way to write it.
I think because most of us are trained from a quantitative background, we find it really difficult to write qualitative papers. But I recently talked to someone who came from a qualitative background and she had no idea how to write a quantitative paper. So she knew everything about qualitative papers. Yeah.
That's so strange.
Yeah.
But I also feel like a lot of reviewers are not going to be big qualitative people anyway, so they won't know what to ask or how to judge something.
Baffle them with my bullshit. No one knows what we're talking about, but it sounds impressive.
But yeah, qualitative research is a bit of a challenge. I recently paid like $100 of my own money to buy a qualitative research textbook just so I had like something to refer to reference. Because with qualitative research, it's so hard, even within your group of researchers, like your co-authors, everyone has different thoughts.
Yeah.
So just to get past that, to submit it, and you just need to appease them, bamboozle them with a reference, distract them and submit it.
Yes, I echo this hate for qualitative research. I definitely prefer original research or secondary data analysis. Systematic reviews just take so long to do. I mean, you get a lot of citations for it, but
I don't mind qualitative stuff. I mean, I feel like sometimes when I submit a quantitative paper, I feel less confident about it. Like, I feel like there could be errors.
See, I'm different. I love my stats. Stats is math. if there's no right or wrong, there's just one answer. I mean, there's a right answer. So how do you guys usually like write your papers and approach it? See, like going on from that thing that I like stats, I always write the results first. And then I write a bit of the discussion, and then I go back to the intro, write the intro, and then write the rest of the discussion, and then methodology last. Because methodology you don't have to think about for me. Because I'm just like, it's just what I did. So yeah.
Yeah. I think for that reason, I put methodology first, and then do the rest of the steps the same way you said.
But sometimes I find that if my results are not interesting, because I do my results. I know this is what people say you shouldn't do, but I always do the analysis first. And then see if it's like worth making a paper out of. Yeah.
Publishing.
And then if only then will I write it up. And then because I have to present everything in nice tables anyway to show my supervisor, that's why I always just end up doing the results first.
And the abstract last. I find it really annoying to write abstract. It's hard because you find yourself kind of wanting to duplicate what you've written in the conclusion and the introduction.
You just copy the last sentence and reword it in a different way.
Yeah, I like the abstract where you actually follow the same format. Like you have methods, results, and conclusion. It just guides it. Yeah, whereas if it's just an open 300 words.
Like, no, guide me, please.
Yeah, give me structure so I feel safe.
All right, so that brings us to the end of this video. Please do add any questions or comments you have about the publication process in academia below. And of course, if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel.